Let the fun commence. What we're going to do today, really all week, is devoted to these bibs, because I know some of you still have some questions about them. God knows I've had emails. But mainly, get us all in a level playing field today in terms of what I'm looking for from them. For that purpose, I guess I should start here so you can pull this up. I sent you guys a workshop for today. It's in your inbox. There's 2 emails like always. One's a backup. Open whichever one works for you. But for today, sort of in service of figuring out what the hell it is we're trying to do, we're going to look at 2 bibs, one about Vonnegut, one about Jarvis. The good news is, we know about those already, hopefully. We've spent an extensive amount of time, I feel, talking about Vonnegut. And we talked about Jarvis a decent bit last time. So, worst case, my hope is you're not lost today. What we're going to do, I guess standard bit of a preamble. This is classmates' work that they turned in. It's anonymous. As always, if you feel really antsy, if we do a workshop and it turns out to be your stuff, as long as you don't call yourself out, nobody else knows, just ride it out. You'll make it to the end of class. It's going to be okay. All right. On the flip side, if it's not yours, especially, let's remember to be respectful. I pull work because I think that it does some good things, but I also usually think that it does some things we need to talk about that we can improve upon that's going to help all of us, right? That's what we're after with what we're looking at today. Okay, so all that out of the way. Hopefully you've had time to pull it up. As I said, there are 2 entries, and I know to you it's going to feel like it's a lot of reading. I believe we can do it, okay? First one's about Vonnegut, second one is about Jarvis. All I want you to try to do, and I'm gonna talk a little more after I give you the directions, but I want to set out what we're doing first. For each entry, to the best of your ability, what are their primary arguments? What are they trying to talk about? They don't always come right out and say it, by the way. I'm gonna try to be clear with you. They absolutely have some ideas in both of these entries. So you should not read these entries and go, they don't have arguments. That's not true, all right? I'll let you know. But sometimes they're not as upfront as they can be. Sometimes I think they kind of lose the thread, if you're familiar with that metaphor. So we're going to talk about that stuff. But again, to the best of your ability right now, before we talk about it, we're going to read through these, see what you can make out of what they give you, okay? I said I had more to say and I forgot what it was. I don't know. Oh, just to review very quickly the format of the bibs. I think that'll help you a little bit. At the very top of each bib, again, because there are 2 here, you have the MLA citation, okay? Under that, you're going to have a paragraph that basically tries to summarize the source and then talk a little bit about how they plan to use that source, okay? So that first paragraph is more general. The next 2 paragraphs, much more specific. Those are quotations from the source. Typically, that's where you're going to find more specific arguments, more specific claims, okay? So if you are hunting that material, which we are, you're going to want to spend a little more time on those sections. Make sense? All right, take a couple minutes, read over it, we're going to talk about it. Anybody need more time? Okay. Raise your hand. No, it was not. He's just pretending to work. What is that? Anyway. All right. Before we dive into your thoughts, which I'm sure are awesome, I want to, as I will sometimes do, sneak in a quick lesson about syntax. Syntax is related to grammar, but it's different. Syntax is not like, you guys, at least in a lot of ways, know when something is grammatically incorrect, right? Like verbs have to agree with nouns, things like this, okay? You had years and years of grade school for that. Syntax is greater, all right? It's not like, for instance, this sentence is grammatically incorrect. There's nothing you could point to and say, well, that's wrong, okay? This is from the Bib, by the way. It's early in the first century. Syntactically, though, it doesn't sound awesome. Specifically, in this case, it's pretty repetitive, it's pretty bulky, like it's wordy in ways that it doesn't need to be. So very quickly, I just want to take a machete to it, okay? To begin with, first part of the sentence, the story follows Billy Pilgrim. That's fine. That's really tight. You have a subject. That subject is doing something. This happens to tell you what that subject is doing in relation to the verb, right? You need all this, in other words. But you can't do much there, probably. Where we go off the rails is pretty much everything after this comma. Who is living through World War II firsthand and follows his struggles while in the war. Immediately, I'm just going to ask you guys, I told you this is repetitive. Does anything feel repetitive about this sentence, particularly after that comma? Yeah.
He's living through World War II, and so obviously he's following his own struggles. Like he's living.
Yeah. Good. That's one. We had a couple. Anything else you guys notice? Go for it.
Living through World War II, but then it also says while in the war.
So
They kind of
surely we don't need both of those,
Yeah.
right? Good. There's one more, and this one may fly under your radar, but I want to see if anybody catches it. Yes, ma'am. One more time? Why do you say that? Well, I think what you might be hitting upon is that this whole section is a little strange, and it kind of starts here. To your point, this language in particular isn't necessarily wrong or misplaced, but what it leads to is. What I was actually looking for, and again, I'm sorry, this feels like a stupid game show. Do you have something to touch?
Would it not be follow again? Because
that's weird. I actually forgot about that one, but yeah, we say it twice. Look, so what we've highlighted real quick. These, because you're saying the same thing twice. I forget the other one. Oh, the fact that we're talking about how he's living, but also his struggles. And unfortunately for life, his struggles are kind of a part, right? So we know that a lot of these are saying the same thing over and over again. That's half the battle. Just recognizing places where you're kind of just saying the same thing twice in different ways. The harder part, oftentimes, can be eliminating those redundancies, okay? But what I'm going to tell you is, usually it's only difficult because you can't make yourself comfortable with deleting your own words, right? There's two primary reasons for that. First reason is, I wrote those. I want to write them. That's more work. I feel you. The other reason is, honestly, especially given generally your lack of experience, you guys are young, if I erase all that, what the fuck am I going to do now, right? Like, you got to make a whole new thing. That's pressure. That's weird pressure. I can't say much about getting rid of either one of those. Those make sense. You're allowed to feel that way. What I am going to tell you, though, if you want to be a better writer, and I know most of you don't, but if you want to be a better writer, if only to get a better grade, all of a sudden I have your attention. This is one of the things you got to do, right? You got to make yourself as comfortable as you can with, sometimes I got to delete stuff, take another swing, it happens. In this case, and in most cases, not all, but in most cases, you think about your verbs, okay? Follows, we repeat twice, we're going to have one of those. We're going to roll with one, first of all. But then after this, I don't know if you guys realize this, is a verb. Struggles would normally be a verb, but here it's actually a noun because of how we use it. So already we have 3 verbs very quickly, where most of the time one will probably get the job done. Every time you install a new verb, you're adding language to a sentence because that verb has to modify something. I know I'm boring you to tears, but try to stick with me here, okay? So let's, for the sake of argument, just roll with this one because already I told you guys, that first bit is fine. It's tight, it's all necessary, that's fine. So we got to think about, maybe to your earlier point about who is really the problem. Is and follows, we've got to eliminate those. Oh, and a quick bonus I just want to point out, there's no other way to live. You're living through your life right now firsthand. I just delete that already, just get rid of it. All right, so the story follows Billy Pilgrim, who's living through World War II, and follows his struggles while in the war. Is there any way we could try to boil down everything between those parentheses that you guys can see? Yeah. We've already said that these are kind of the same thing. Well, that eliminate one. I think struggles is more specific. We do talk about his life, but we're not doing that here. We're talking about World War II. What does he probably do while in World War II? Probably a lot of struggling. Okay. The story follows Billy Pilgrim and his struggles. That's your new sentence. That's it. We say the same thing. We say exactly the same thing we just said. It's way tighter. I'm telling you, half of being a better writer is pretending to be. I mean that. If you do it enough, all of a sudden you actually are. But to begin with, everybody kind of sucks. Any skill. I love this metaphor. First time you ever played basketball. I'm teaching my 6-year-old how to play basketball right now. He was terrible, like laughably bad. He's okay now. He's played a lot. He's a lot better than he was. It's a skill. This is a skill. That's why this class for most of you is hard compared to your other classes, because your other classes are memorization. They're not skills. You watch PowerPoint, you study until you fall asleep, then you go take a test where you bubble in stuff, you get a grade on that. That's memorization. That's not really a skill. This is a skill. It takes practice. Lesson over. All right, let's talk about the bibs. Let's do the first one first. Vonnegut. I already told you guys that first paragraph is really just a summary, right, of kind of what they want to talk about. There in the second half, they talk about how they want to use it, although to be super clear and save us some time, they don't really tell us what they want to do. They do a thing I call narrating your process, right, which is where you say things like, I will look at other papers, I will find evidence, and I'm like, you just want to do that? Do you guys see the problem with that? I'm being funny, but like I'm trying to be really clear here. The problem with narrating your process is you're telling me what you're going to do, or what I hope you do, when I would much rather you just do it. What evidence are you thinking about? How might you use this? Now they say this here because they haven't thought that far ahead, and that's okay. But this isn't what we're trying to do. Anyway. So those next 2 paragraphs, those are what we're focused on, right? Did you guys make any discoveries in those next 2 paragraphs? The first one is about the Englishman. The second one is about Derby. We can take either one on. I don't care. Up to you.
What do you mean disclose?
Ideas, arguments. What do you think they're trying to get at in either one of these paragraphs? I just say discoveries because I'm an idiot. Yeah.
The first one is about like masculinity.
What about it? I agree.
Like their image
Ooh.
during the war.
That's the exact language I came up with. All right, so let me get something going over here. I got new markers. My wife gave me new markers. 'Cause I'm a child. All right. We'll get to war in a second. because I think we're kind of making 2 points at once. So let's tease this out just a little bit. The image of masculinity, right? You can look at what they quote about the Englishman if you like, or you can just use your memory because we talked about these guys before. What are we getting at when we say the image of masculinity? What does that have to do with these Englishmen? They're POWs in the German camp, right, that the Americans run into.
The quote he used has to do with their image, though. Like, he said, their washboard bellies and their calves look like cannonballs.
Yeah.
You can see that imagery.
That's like what men are supposed to look like.
Good. So I'd modify it a little bit further, and that's good language, right? It's the...
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, really.
So polite. It's the ideal image. You understand? An ideal is what people aspire to, or what people envision. There are reasons for that, which we have talked about, okay? We're not doing that just yet. But the point is, the way the Englishmen are presented in that quoted material, just really in the whole section, right, that they're in the book, they're this ideal image of masculinity. They look the part. And I would argue they carry themselves accordingly too, right? They kind of live out that image. Now we connect this to something else that you were trying to get at, and I kind of cut you off. Do you happen to remember what that was?
With how they look in the war, specifically?
What do you mean by that?
I don't know.
That's all good.
I was thinking more of like from the perspective of Mary O'Hare, like she was like making it look like it's super cool when you have to be really strong and
Make what look super cool?
war.
Good. So also what we're doing. We're also talking about this, okay? Now, 2 things here. Number 1, everything we just said about the ideal image of masculinity, how it's assumed to be. Again, like I tell you right now, picture like a super masculine guy. Like we all have roundabout, like we have really similar images. That's not you, dog. That's you. We all grew up in the same place, right? Relatively speaking. So we have the same ideal, stereotypical image. We're saying it's the same for war. And we're saying the Englishmen, by and large, fit that bill too. So the same rules apply when it comes to, well, then this must be a societal thing, right? This must be like how it's portrayed to us or sold to us or whatever. You know, we have this narrative about it. Sure. What's also interesting, and this is what I was getting at before when I said they have some missed opportunities, okay? They bring up both of these kind of separately in that paragraph. I'm almost screaming at myself when I'm reading their bib. I'm like, well, then aren't these maybe connected? Aren't we saying they have something to do with each other? If you have this idealized image of masculinity, might it also weirdly fit the kind of ideal image of a soldier, right? The ideal image of a war? Can we picture them together? There's something to be said about that. We don't quite do it, and that's okay, it's a bit, but that's absolutely there in that paragraph, those quotations. Okay, there's more to be said about that, but I want to get stuff up on the board first. Second quotation, that was about Derby. They pick, I'm going to be honest with you, a pretty interesting quotation. I think there are other ones with Derby we could have done. But this one's definitely got something to it. Derby spoke movingly of the American government with freedom and justice and opportunities and fair play for all. This is when he's telling that Nazi off. You know, he's like, fuck you, and here's why, right? I think we got something here when we're trying to talk about Derby, but it's a little muddy. Like, I don't think we've quite... Did you guys pick up on what we're trying to say about this guy in this paragraph? Yeah, and part of this is because, again, we talked about this part, right, in class. Just before this, we could use this context here. Just before this, the narrator says, Derby was a character now. And then he launches into this little speech that he gives. What about that?
He's acting. Like,
That's kind of what the narrator... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh,
You're good. I cut you off, I'm sorry.
okay, he's acting.
Yeah. So, acting like what? That's kind of what we never figure out, right? And I think you're kind of getting at this too with the character bit. Like, the narrator tells us he's playing a role, basically, when he says these things. What is that role, though? I think we got to say that to have like a real argument. What character is he playing if he's a character? Yeah, I think so. And before we go further into that, we got to make sure we believe this. How do we know? How can we, the only evidence we have is that quotation. How can we use that quotation to try to talk about that? What does Derby sound like when he says this stuff to this Nazi? What do you mean by that? It's all right. We're trying to figure this out. What time is it, by the way? Sweet. All right, we got time. Anyway, what kind of soldier? Who talks like this? I don't know if you guys remember. I asked a similar question when we talked about this part of the book, and you guys were similarly quiet. So this will be fun.
Soldier who played in like movies and stuff.
Okay. Why do you? I happen to agree with you, but if this were in a paper, which it might be, we would have to speak to that somehow. We have to prove that. Why do you think that's the case? And if anybody wants to help Natasha out, you feel free. You know.
Doesn't it sound like John Wayne? Like some-
Maybe. Why do you think so?
Why do I think he sounds like this?
Yeah. That's what argument is. There's always a why or a how that you have to answer. To be totally transparent, I agree with you. I think that's true. But we got to say why we think so. How does he sound? And again, to make it maybe a little easier, it's not just a soldier in a movie, it's a hero in a movie. Right? The guy who gets to speak in parts, the guy who gets to tell the Nazi off, right? That's not just a soldier. Those people die in the background. This is the hero, the main character. But how could you prove that he does sound like that when he says these things? I'll read a quotation again. He spoke movingly of the American government, of freedom and justice and opportunities and fair play for all. How does that sound like the hero in a movie?
The hero always wants justice.
I think we all do.
Is he trying to save everybody?
Huh?
Like,
Is he saving anybody with this speech?
I ain't speaking for everybody. I mean,
How do you know? You might have something there.
I feel like he's saying like cliche, like
Good.
words.
He sounds like a fucking billboard. Right? He does. Like he might as well have an eagle flying behind him and he may believe these things. We don't, but all we have is this quotation. How does he sound? It's very cliche. It's very cliche. Especially when you consider how the American soldiers up to this point have carried themselves, right? They may all believe this somewhere deep down. I don't know. They damn sure don't sound like this, right? With freedom and just that's from the pledge, guys. Do they still make you do that, by the way? The Pledge of Allegiance?
Again.
It's kind of fucked up that you have to do it. Anyway, with freedom and liberty and justice, right? It's the same kind of cadence. It's the same kind of cliche. Just it sounds like a bumper sticker type of talk. Yeah. People, when we think of them as people, tend not to speak in cliches, right? They sound like people. This sounds like he's reading it, like it's scripted. You could argue. Now we got something. Now we've kind of proved our argument, at least a little bit. He's playing that role of the hero, the war hero. Cool. We're going to leave that alone for just a minute. I'll move to Jarvis. And again, that first paragraph on the Jarvis entry, is some summary that may help you a little bit, right? Just kind of dive back into Jarvis. But it's really those next two paragraphs we're interested in. The first one has that quotation about John Wayne. But then we actually move to the story about her dad. So we have two pieces of evidence there. And then the second paragraph, we're talking about dehumanization. So again, dealer's choice, whatever you guys would like. Whatever you guys would like to talk about. What do you think? What discoveries did you make reading about Jarvis here? Which paragraph? Are you looking at the first paragraph? Okay. We're comparing masculinity with war. Why do you put it like that?
Because it said they're saying like a correlation.
Yeah. What interests me about them putting it that way, and it kind of forces you to put it that way, aren't we just kind of dressing up the idea that we're just saying they have something to do with each other? Isn't that what we're doing here? We're finding a correlation, that's fancy. We're just kind of finding a fancy way to say that they're connected. And again, it's true. The hard part is, it's our job to try to put into words how they're connected. Okay? And you guys stop short of that most of the time because you're like, that sounds like work, I'm not doing it. But that means you're in a good place. If you go, I don't know, well then try to figure it out. But yes, there is some kind of correlation. I'm going to stop right here, actually. What might it be? Let's look at what the paragraph gives us. We have two pieces of evidence. The first one, and we can eliminate some of this, right? We can paraphrase some of this. But John Wayne, Sergeant Stryker, still managed to celebrate the hard-boiled, blood and guts heroism of American men. If I were to ask you, and I guess I am, that quotation, what's the most interesting language in that quotation? Because I think we could lose a lot of it, actually. But you could not lose this. For sure. That's the stuff you need. And then perhaps also heroism of American men, because it's kind of defining that. Everything else from that quotation, you can lose. You don't need that stuff. You can paraphrase it. Put that in your own words. But that also helps, because now we know, well, this is what we're going to focus on. Hard-boiled, blood and guts heroism of American men. Apparently that's what that movie is about, according to Jarvis. Might that have something to do with this connection, this correlation between masculinity and war? The hard-boiled, blood and guts heroism of American men. That's my wife's hair. Jesus Christ. It's so long. Sorry, it was wrapping around my hand. It was driving me crazy. Let's think about this, because I don't know how helpful that quotation is. I think that's why we have another piece of evidence. Talk to me about Jarvis's dad. What was the deal with him when he was young? He went to see this movie, right? What happened?
They were recruiting.
And guys were signing up. So it seemed like it was successful. What about that? We don't really talk about that, but I think that is the single most, to be honest with you, interesting thing in her paper.
Well, the movie is called like false advertising almost.
Well, I mean, for sure it is. Well, if you appreciate it as just a movie, no.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we could very easily argue with recruiters standing outside the door that no one is treating it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's pretty messed up. You had your hand up as well, sir?
I can keep going.
Okay. Jump back in later. All right. So let's find out. I like false advertising. Sort of this, let me see. Real world, can't talk, right? Real world Mary. I don't know how else to sum it up. But exactly what Mary was worried about, right? Kids are going to see these movies. They're going to think that's how it is. They're going to go sign up thinking they're going to live that awesome movie life. And Jarvis is like, oh yeah, that totally happened. Yeah. Okay. Next paragraph, because we got more work to do. I want to get these up on the board. We talk about dehumanization, right? We got that quotation about it. Has something to do with bodies and how they're viewed. What do we get to talking about all that? I mean, basically, a lot of it is the idea that war dehumanizes people, right? Just makes you a number, a statistic, a body, which is true. I guess we could put that up on the board. There's more here than just that. I'm going to direct you to round about the second half of this paragraph. If you need to, you can reread it real quick. We kind of, sort of imply another point that we put down, I guess.
World War II and Vietnam correlate.
Well, they correlate in the way that they're both wars and terrible, according to Vonnegut, and that they both dehumanize, right? For sure. But again, we bring up something else in the second half, not just war. Talk to me about these soldiers being heroic, their death as a sacrifice. We say normally they would be mourned. Well, what does it mean if they're not? They're saying that they've been what? Yeah. But again, the student is kind of making the point here, or maybe Jarvis is making the point here. I mean, consider the paragraph this is in, right? We're talking about how war dehumanizes people. And that's pretty easy. I mean, we get that. This related point, so I think we're talking about dehumanization in some kind of a way. It's talking about heroism and sacrifice for the greater good. It's kind of interesting, the point that they're almost making and they don't quite make it. If you're lauded, SAT word I suppose, if you're celebrated as a hero for that sacrifice, what are they kind of implying? What is done to you as a result of that? Let's consider that for a second. How might that be the case? You're a hero, right? We see you as a human being, for sure, right? No. Somebody, and this will be a weird question, possibly. Does anybody in here have a hero? Somebody you look up to, somebody you, don't say your mom or your dad, I mean like a legit superhero. My son, he's 6. One of his heroes, Darth Vader. I don't know why he cheers for the bad guys. It was a little upsetting. Do you guys have anybody like that level of shit? Like if they walked in the room, you wouldn't be able to talk to these people. Be serious. Nobody's got anybody? You guys are, I knew you guys are in that weird spot in life where like you're too old to have like kid heroes, but you're not old enough to like think about life and what it could be yet.
I mean, I like Spider-Man.
Okay. There's nobody you guys look up to.
Like our parents and stuff.
But see, that's weird because they're familiar. You can talk to them. There's nobody. If they walk through the door, you'd be like at least super shy.
Well, there'd be people that would do that, but I don't know if I would look up to them in that sense.
I just
Like who?
I mean, I think it could just be anyone that you just like
like
you
that's
know.
famous or something.
Yeah.
Like who?
John Mulaney.
Beyonce. That's a good one. Okay. Now you guys say maybe you don't look up to her as a hero. I think part of it might be that term might be messing with you. Why if she walked in, you wouldn't immediately go, "Hey Beyonce, what's up, girl?" You give her a hug. Like, why wouldn't you do that?
She's like so much higher above us. Like she's on like another level.
So much so that you can't converse with or touch her.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like a human being to me. Right? It doesn't. She poops. Do you guys know that? She does not. You shut your mouth. She's a goddess. That's my point. We don't view her as a person. We don't even use her last fucking name. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's interesting, the point they're starting to make here at the end, weirdly, when these guys become heroic, in a way, they're dehumanized by that heroism, right? All of a sudden, there's some like untouchable thing. They're not people anymore, right? They get monuments, perhaps, you know, and again, we celebrate them, but even a monument, that's a thing made of like stone or iron or fucking, it'll outlive us all. That's not for people, you know? That's a different thing. So war dehumanizes in this negative way that we've absolutely talked about in terms of, I'll just sum it up as like body count, you know? But another interesting thing they hit upon here at the end is it can go to the other side of the spectrum. Something we think of as, I think, pretty positive, you know, can also dehumanize. That's weird. I'll tell you what, I bet Beyonce would occasionally love to just go to the grocery store. She can't. That's people shit. She don't get to do that anymore. You know? Alright. So what do we have here? At this stage, we only have 2 texts. But again, the good thing about the bibs, it focuses what you, sort of your menu, okay? There's way more in Vonnegut. There's actually a good deal more in Jarvis. But the bib is only so long, it only has so many parts, you can only talk about so much. So for this student, this is what they came up with, right? Could they reach into those texts later on in the process and find something? For sure, right? You're not limited to this. But this is where they can start now. And keep in mind too, next time, we're gonna have 2 more texts. So it'll broaden the menu a bit. All I wanna do for a couple minutes is the thing that we've done several times now. I wanna try to connect some of these. Can we make Vonnegut, at any point, speak to Jarvis, or vice versa? What do you guys think?
I say the two first ones with humanization.
These?
Yeah.
Ideal image of masculinity, ideal image of war with, how so?
Because like the perception of war and masculinity, like dehumanizes like anything that's wrong.
I think I'm with you. I need to, like, how do you mean? You gotta explain that a little more.
Like like our perception of what like a man is, what war is.
Uh-huh.
It like dehumanizes a man and
The man that's in the war?
The man that's in the war.
Okay. So, like, to bring it back to some of the evidence we had, because I want to make sure I follow you. Like, the Englishmen, do you see those guys as people in the book?
No, because they like kind of like disregard that they have like actual lives, and they're not just like people that just kill guys and they're immortal and all that.
Kind of. All right. So I think I follow you. So what you're saying is, in this particular instance, we have these guys who kind of enact these images, right? But even, I mean, we're calling them images, right? We're not calling them people. It dehumanizes them in that way.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I'm with you there. Did everybody follow that? I want to make sure it's not just me and Stefan having a conversation. Although you're great, but it, Can we go anywhere else from either one of these 2 points?
Yes.
Go for it.
To the real world Mary.
How?
I mean, I think part of it can connect to like her perspective of things too,
Uh-huh.
and just the way that she like feels so strongly about like that image of war and masculinity and how it shouldn't be like glorified.
Because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying kind of from this same thing, but over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I feel that's where like what she's always arguing for, or like what she argues.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, the best part with these ideas, if you do your job right, you can apply them in several different ways. But in this case, yeah, I can see that. All right, so what would this look like? Because right now, we're actually dealing with some pretty big pieces of text. the way this reads, you kind of have two offshoots from this, right? If we were to build, let me see if this is on screen. Yeah, probably. All right, if we were to try to build this in a body paragraph, it seems most evident. We'd start with the Englishman, right? And this idea that they are the ideal image of, I'm going to try to sum it up, wartime masculinity, right? So inherently, we're kind of connecting those two ideas. From there, you can go to either one of these, right? It's really up to you, but you would then at some point transition to, I guess I'll make a, where to put this? I'll put a V here so we can keep track of who's saying what. From here, you can go to war dehumanizes. I'm going to have a question about this. I'm not just doing all this on my own, by the way. And then from there again, so already we've started building, and it doesn't look like it right here, a fairly sizable body paragraph. Like if you make connections like we just made, I would actually tell you just start that paragraph and see where it goes, because there's gonna be some length involved in this. Okay, some words. We get the top one. The Englishmen, they're the ideal image of wartime masculinity. We talked about that. I think that makes total sense. We can ride with that. The trick will be, once you make some connections, and then you move to this stage where you're like, well, I think I can get from there to there and then there, you got to think about how to transition. So how are we going to move from this idea to this one? What element of this idea could we kind of point to and say, yeah, because of this, that also brings up this other idea? What we're doing right now is how the whole paper works, by the way, just to be clear. So, what about the fact, to kind of reframe the question, what about the fact that the Englishmen are this ideal image of wartime masculinity gets us to the dehumanizing effect of war? There's a couple ways we can do that, but what's one way? We could transition between those two ideas. You guys always shut down when I talk a lot. I don't know how to fix that. Is there a way to talk about dehumanization, because that's our big idea here, when it comes to the Englishmen and how they're depicted? Do they seem like people to you guys, these Englishmen? Why do you say that? Because there's a couple reasons. But.
Like, nobody was, like how you said, like they take shits, they piss on them.
You know who does in the book?
Who?
Who? We see it.
What was the question?
Well, to quote Stefan, who takes shits in the book? Who pisses? We see that. Who does it? It's I think it's a very memorable scene. We get a good long description of some bodily functions in that chapter. I'll give you a hint. It's not the Englishman. Oh, come on now. God.
Car things?
Huh? Oh, well, that's true. Now, to be totally technical, that we do realize that's not the trains that are doing that, right? Who's in the trains? The Americans. Remember, too, when they get to the camp, the Englishmen have made them this feast. But because they're so starved, because they're so beaten up, when they eat all that food, what happens? Their body rejects it. Yeah, they have real issues, and we get a description of that. I only say it's memorable because I would have thought at some point you guys reading that would have been like, why are we reading this? Well, one reason could be, we could argue, we see those Americans and how different they are from the Englishmen. And they are very different. One of the stark differences is bodily functions and the fact that we get to see that happen. Another difference is the Americans don't really fit that, right? They're all broken and pissed off, and right? They don't seem like anybody you'd want to hang out with or get to know. But we're trying to argue that's because they're people. People suck sometimes. I don't know if you're aware of this. Anybody who's ever worked like with the public, you realize it's real fast. Yeah, it's just some people are like that. Some people are like that on certain days. The Englishmen are never like that. They're awesome the whole time. So awesome that, like Beyonce, they don't even go to the bathroom. It just disappears or something. Right? So what we're saying, yes ma'am?
Can we just like say that the Englishmen are these actors, basically?
Well, yeah, they're good. So when we talk about the ideal image, one way to talk about it is the fact that they are literally actors, right? But again, we're applying that more broadly to they're acting like soldiers. They're acting like what a soldier should be. You know, the Germans even say that too, right? But again, our point is the expectations associated with war lead them to this, which leads them to being dehumanized. That's our transition between those two ideas. Last one we got to do. I know it's been fun. Can we now move from war, its dehumanizing effects, to, I summed it up as Real World Mary. It's the episode in Jarvis where she talks about her dad going to see Sands of Iwo Jima, coming out, and there's Marine recruiters right outside the door, and people are signing up. How do we get from all the stuff we were just saying about war, dehumanizing people? This could be body count, and or the dehumanizing effects actually of heroism, which is interesting too. How do we move from that to Mary's concerns, sort of playing out in the real world? What do you think? What's Mary worried about? Let's start there.
Children,
Mostly, yeah. Wars will be fought by the babies upstairs. You guys were babies when you know. And I know you guys don't like to hear this. You're like, I'm 18, bro. No, I mean, yeah, sure. Why does she call them babies? We didn't talk enough about that when we talked about the book. Why does she keep calling them babies? What does she mean?
they have more experience.
Good. You don't. Even when you're 18, you're like, man, I've seen things. You haven't seen shit. Not yet. You know, not war. For damn certain. So according to Mary, you're babies in that respect, right? You don't have that experience. So what? Why does that matter to her? She's worried something is going to happen. People see these movies, read these books, that make war look cool, right? What is she worried is going to happen? We've talked about this. Here and then there.
I think she's worried that like since people see the movies,
Yeah.
they're also joining and like that's not really gonna be a good thing because they're not experiencing.
Well, it's capitalizing upon that lack of experience. Is that what you're going to say, Stefan?
But I was just saying, like, how, and you know how like Uncle Sam came out, they were like advertising and all that for like young teens to like join the war.
No, you guys are the target market, yeah, for sure. When he says we want you, he doesn't mean me.
Yeah, he's talking about like 18.
Yeah, you're all fresh and you don't know any better. Yeah. And again, her point is you don't know any better. So you're easier to trick, basically. And it works. We see it work in Jarvis. Can we, and this is the tricky part, this is what you got to do in this paper. Can we move from the dehumanizing effects of war to anything Mary is worried about when it comes to this lack of experience, when it comes to being easier to trick? What's that got to do with the dehumanizing effects of war, do you think?
I think we get tired by like saying prey. Because like prey, like you know, like animals, not people. And so Mary is like basically telling us like we're prey. So once we enter the war and stuff,
Yeah. I think I kind of get. You gotta tease that out for me a little. I think I follow you a little bit.
I just don't know how to word it.
I know.
Something with prey.
No, I mean that's a super dark metaphor. I'm here for it. All right, let me try to build out a little bit of what I think you're saying. So, war dehumanizes us, and therein lies your prey metaphor. A baby deer may be very cute, but it's certainly not a person. And if it's prey, well, now it's just meat. What's that got to do with Mary wondering about lack of experience? That's the connection we got to make. I think we can. Look, when you lack experience, what does that mean? We talked about this with a little boy. What does lack of experience really mean?
Living life.
Yeah, but what does that lived life bring with it? Don't say experience. What does it bring with it? You live longer, typically what happens? Yeah. Sure. A little broader than that. Like, you now, you're 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there. If you could go back in time to when you were 9, other than size, what would be one of the profound differences?
Ignorance,
What does that mean? What does ignorance mean?
not knowing.
You don't know anything. When you're 9, you're fucking stupid. Are you kidding me? I love my 6-year-old. He's an idiot. That's probably part of why I love him. I want to protect him. But that, when we say experience, it's lived experience. You're gaining knowledge, right? You know better the older you get, just because you've seen more things. So to bring it back, if war dehumanizes, right? And we all, I think, pretty much agree that that's bad. We don't want to be dehumanized. We could agree with that? Okay. What could we maybe argue to transition from here to here? Mary's worried about your lack of experience. She's worried you don't know better. You don't know enough to know what? Something about war. Yes. Because again, in the movies, man, John Wayne looks cool. Who's more recent? The Rock. Dude, it'd be cool to be The Rock. Just fucking jumping off the buildings and everybody's like, oh, The Rock is so cool. And like, I know. That looks awesome. He definitely looks like a person that I can see. You don't know any better. You don't know that when you go to war, definitely not The Rock. Or any of these guys. You're not that person. According to Vonnegut and according to Jarvis, you're a number. You might die. Most people aren't going to care. That's how we move between those ideas. Everything we just did, first of all, isn't always easy. That's fine. Okay? It is. But I'm telling you, 2 things. Number 1, when you talk about evidence, like we've done today, focus on details. Sometimes it's linguistic, other times it's a specific facet of an idea, right? It's not just war, in this case, it's what war does and the fact that you don't know that. And that's how you get taken advantage of. That's how we move, right? That's how the whole paper is going to work, I promise you. If you do the paper well, this is how you're going to do it. Moving between ideas using specific details, okay? Everything we practiced up until today has been organization. That's like the first half. The second half is this stuff. We're going to practice it more next time, but this is how it works. This is how you build body paragraphs. Secondly, you'll like this one more. Everything we just did, all those words, with some edits, that's what your paper will be. You got to explain this stuff. That's length. All you guys who are like, this 3 pages, 4 pages, this is how it happens though. Explaining how the ideas connect, what the ideas even are, that's where your paper is going to come from. If you do that stuff reasonably well, you will not sweat that page requirement. You won't, I promise you. Will it be fun when you're doing it? No. But will you do it? Yeah. 95% of the time. Questions about any of that? Okay. What time is it? Oh, I knew it. All right. For next time, we're going to do something similar. So strap in for that, but it'll be more developed. We're going to basically start closer to here so that we can build more of this. Okay? I strongly encourage you to build your papers like this, but I can't force you. Due next time, you have 2 more bibs. I'm trying to look at those. Basically what I do with the bibs, on course day when you submit them, I only ever comment on the bibs if I see something that just straight up won't work. And I haven't looked at all of them yet because I've been bogged down with other classes, but I'm gonna get the bibs looked at this week. Okay? Like by the end of the week, all of your bibs hopefully will be turned in, and like by sometime Friday, I suppose I'll make a promise now. I'll send the class an email letting you guys know I've looked at all the bibs. Okay? And I'm hoping for Friday or early Saturday at the latest. Basically at that time, if you go on and there's like little to no comments on your bibs, that means you're good. Because at this point, I'm just trying to put out fires. Like, oh, why are you doing that? Don't use that. That's a book review. Stuff like that, okay? But I'm telling you right now, I haven't looked at all of them yet. So I just haven't. But it's coming. Yeah, I guess that's it. Everybody's good? Yes, sir.
The 2 other bibs.
Yes.
These 2.
Hmm?
What would they be on?
Oh, girl. Those are 2 you find. Okay? I don't know if you were here that day. I mean, I honestly don't. There is a day last week. I don't know when it was. I call it the research crash course. I pulled up the library website. We dove into like different articles that you could use. Does that ring any bells for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was like, is it have to be based on these 2?
Okay. There's a couple ways to take that question. For my money, at least one of those articles, I would try to think about what ideas I'm interested in Vonnegut and or Jarvis, and go looking for an article that's at least a little bit related. That's going to make your life easier. But potentially, that 4th article, whatever it is, could be based on your 3rd one. You know what I'm saying? You want these guys to connect some kind of a way. But to cut through some other questions that may be related to yours, they don't even have to be about Slaughterhouse-Five, actually. They can be. I've had students in the past. I had a girl a couple semesters ago, and I only remember it because she brought me a blog, and I was like, a blog? But it was good, actually. It was by a dude who had been in, I think, Iraq, and had written about it, but in like a scholarly way. I mean, it was a blog, which again, I'm like, ugh. But it was well done. He had ideas, he had arguments, and it absolutely had something to do with a lot of the stuff we've talked about. Didn't mention Slaughterhouse-Five once, right? The important thing is the ideas. But again, to like fully answer your question, what I would say is it does not specifically have to do with Slaughterhouse-Five or any of that, but it needs to cover related ground in terms of the ideas.
Big ideas are next to war.
For sure. Or again, I mean, especially when because you got to tie in Jarvis some kind of a way. But Vonnegut talks about other stuff too, potentially. You know, fate and free will, we haven't really covered the past couple days because we've been dealing with Jarvis. There's other stuff cooking in there that you can tie in. I've seen students do it. But you absolutely want to use these as like a foundation for the most part. Yes?
Does it have to be academic journals?
No, it doesn't have to be. I mean, I would start there. For multiple reasons. But again, the story I just told, the blog that I had a student use, I would say those are the exception rather than the rule, though. When in doubt, like if you find something you think works and you're not sure, email me.
I already have sources. I was just asking in general.
Well, no, but I'm putting that out there for anybody. Like legit, if you find something and you're like, I think this works, I'm not sure, send it to me. I'll let you know real fast. You know, like, oh, this is shit, don't use it. Or, oh, like, oh, wow, this is really cool. You know, yeah, for sure, always. But I would start with the library. It's just a better bet. Any other questions? These are good questions. Okay. I'll see you guys Thursday. Thank you.